I'd never heard of Kyrbastau until I received a completely out-of-the-ordinary email from a man named Adilbek Muratuli. The subject was simply, "They are awakening." The message, written in strange, broken English, claimed his village was disappearing, but not like ordinary ghost towns. It wasn't abandonment, it was consumption. People were being taken, houses went hollow overnight, and according to him, the things that crawl beneath the earth had started to move. I thought it was a prank, or maybe a writer promoting an indie story, until I realized the email domain was from a local server connected to a university in Almaty. The final message haunted me for weeks. If anyone still listens, please bury the village. Don't let them out. I'm a geology professor, not a writer, and at 49, I consider myself overly skeptical, but something in that account deeply unsettled me. After weeks of restless sleep, I decided to take a leave from the university where I teach and go there with a friend who works with drones and mapping. Oleg, a 37-year-old Ukrainian, now a Kazakh citizen. He agreed immediately when he learned about the message's content. If it's true, we have something bigger than archaeology here. If it's fake, at least we'll map a forgotten ghost village, he said. Getting to Kyrbastau was a mission. The roads leading there seemed abandoned since the 1970s. It was as if time had turned back in that place. The buildings made of dried mud and wood were cracked, but still standing. Silence was a presence. No wind, no crickets, nothing. Just total stillness. The village seemed frozen in time, and yet every inch of it felt agonized. There were claw marks on walls, deep holes where the ground had suddenly given way, and strangest of all, a kind of reddish soot spread in the corners of houses. A dark dust, like ash mixed with dried blood. Oleg tried to joke to ease the tension, but I saw sweat rolling down his neck despite the biting cold. We walked to what seemed the center of the village, where a circular stone structure indicated an old well. An elderly woman appeared at a distance, wearing a dark veil and holding a staff. She didn't speak, only pointed to the sky, then to the ground, then made a signal with her fingers, 3 times downward. She turned and vanished behind a ruin. Her expression wasn't a warning. It was pity, as if we were already condemned just by setting foot there. That night, we camped, out in the only seemingly safe building, the old school, with double walls and nailed windows. But terror began before dark fully set in. Oleg launched the drone and started capturing terrain images. One spot that caught our attention was a fissure about 2 kilometers from the village. It was a wide crack, like a tectonic fault, but it wasn't on any official mapping, and from it oozed a kind of dark smoke, only visible with a thermal filter on. While he analyzed the data, I heard something under the house, a dry crack like wood breaking, then another and another. When I put my ear to the floor, I could clearly hear whispers, not just one, but many, as if a multitude was speaking, simultaneously beneath the earth. When Oleg came back, I expected him to say it was just echo or wind. But no, he was pale and trembling. He said that in the last drone footage, something had crawled up from the fissure. A figure, not human, not animal, tall, thin, moving in spasms, and then it dissolved in the air like smoke. We couldn't sleep. Every minute was filled with muffled noises, muted thuds, distant scratching, and that constant whisper as if someone recited prayers in a language our brains weren't made to understand. Around 3:30 a.m., we heard a scream from outside. High, desperate, as if someone was being skinned alive. We ran outside with flashlights. The sound came from beside the school, where there was an old shed. When we opened the door, the stench of rotting flesh nearly knocked us over. And inside, there was something I can't quite explain. Oleg pointed his flashlight and instantly shrank back. At the center of the shed, A female figure floated about a foot above the ground. She had very long black hair, cracked skin, absent eyes. She was suspended, but her mouth moved as if singing, a high-pitched, grotesque song. Her arms were twisted backwards, as if dislocated from the shoulders and inverted. With each note she sang, the floor buckled beneath her. Invisible feet. We couldn't move. For long seconds, time froze. It was only the drone, which crashed to the floor with a metallic bang, that broke our trance. She turned her head toward us, her neck cracking. She smiled. We ran like we'd never run before. We locked the school door, piled up whatever we could find in front and stayed silent, sweating cold, waiting for something we didn't know would come for us. But she didn't come. What we heard next was worse. Footsteps, many, and the ground vibrating. Something was coming out of the earth, and it wasn't just her. There were many. They were awakening, as Adelbeck had warned, but now it was too late. Dawn brought no relief, only a silent, suspicious truce. Oleg and I were exhausted, puffy-eyed, hands shaking. Sitting on the old school's floor, surrounded by overturned desks and stacked chairs, we tried to understand if it had all been real. The problem was, the drone, now broken, had captured the figure, at least a single frame. And there she was, clear, floating with twisted arms, her mouth open in an impossible song. There was no denying anymore. We started planning an immediate escape, but when we tried starting the car, we saw something had drained the battery. Not even the dashboard lights came on. Oleg tried dismantling the hood, cursing in Russian, while I rummaged through one of the classrooms for anything that could help. Flashlights, maps, even makeshift weapons. In the back of a broken bookshelf, I found a diary. It was old, yellowed, with faded Kazakh letters. But I managed to translate parts with my basic knowledge and a still-working cell phone. It was an account, dated 1971. They came from below. They don't walk, they float. They sing to make you forget who you are. First they take the weak, then those who resist. If you hear the third song, you're lost. The diary had bloodstains and a torn final page, scribbled with a message. Don't run, they follow you outside here. Only by burying the song. Bury the song? What did that mean? Oleg called me back when he heard footsteps in the distance. Not like the night before. These were slow, dragging. We went to one of the windows and peeked between the boards. That's when we saw the first child. She looked about 10, pale-skinned, eyes black as bottomless pits. She stood in the street staring at the school. Then another appeared. Then another. Soon a complete ring of children surrounded the school, all motionless, all staring silently, none uttering a word. Oleg pulled out the camera and tried to film, but the lens just darkened when pointed at them, as if light that couldn't be captured by technology. He stopped and looked at me. This isn't natural. This is a hole in the fabric of reality. The only option was to reach the ground fissure, the one the drone had detected. Maybe its origin, the way to understand what the hell was happening, was there. We took what we could. Flashlights, the diary, and an old machete from the school kitchen. We slipped out a back window, avoiding the spectral children who didn't react at all. We walked for more than an hour in silence until the fissure appeared. It was immense, as if the ground had been torn inside out. The air was dense, heavy, smelled of burnt flesh. Standing on the edge, we heard a high-pitched sound, thousands of female voices chanting a muffled choir. It wasn't just a hole. It was a kind of throat, and it pulsed. The ground around us seemed to breathe, and then we saw something moving inside it. From the bottom, a figure began to emerge. It was a woman, or what was left of one. Her eyes were sewn shut, mouth sewn, body thin and pale, spiraled with scars. She didn't walk. She was lifted by a mass of human hands coming out of the earth. The hands held her, offered her, as if presenting a living offering to the living world. When her feet touched the ground, all the voices went silent, and from somewhere we could not identify, a laugh echoed, slow and sharp. Oleg fell to his knees, mumbling he had to get out. I tried pulling him, but the soil beneath us gave way. We fell about 2 meters into an underground chamber, and that's where everything made sense. The chamber was made of bones. The ceiling, walls, floor, everything shaped with human skeletons bound by a dark mass. At the center, a ritual stone carved with ancestral inscriptions I couldn't recognize. Above it, hanging by hooks, Adilbek's body. It was him for sure. The same man from the email, but his chest was open, and inside was a mirror where I saw myself, but dead. Oleg screamed first. A figure, like the one from the previous night, appeared at the chamber's entrance. It floated, but now its visage was different. The face was my mother's. It spoke Russian, then English, then voices that were not human. Return to the center, bring the song. Oleg did not resist. He ran outside the chamber, and I never saw him again. I heard his screams, long. Then, just the sound of flesh being dragged. I looked at the mirror in Adilbek's chest one last time and understood. The object was sealing something. That's where the song was buried. The figure was coming closer, whispering louder in my mind. I had to do something. Now, an important message straight from the heart of the abyss. If you're here with me still at this point, something in you also hears the song. It calls the sensitive, the curious, the bold, so don't fight it. Subscribe to the PaverNet channel right now, because you won't always have someone to warn you before opening the wrong door. And tell me in the comments, if a creature wore the shape of the person you love most, could you run from it? Leave your answer below. I want to know who still listens clearly and who is already getting lost in the sound. The figure wearing my mother's face now stretched her arms to me as if offering an embrace. But her eyes, those eyes weren't hers. They were dark, too deep, with tiny red points pulsing like beating hearts. The thing floated inches above the floor, her skin seeming to melt like hot wax. By the second, the face shifted. My mother, my father, an old friend from university, a man I had never seen, as if trying to find a mask that would make me give in, but I couldn't. Not there, not after seeing the mirror set in Adilbek's body. I grabbed a sharp piece of bone from the floor and, stomach churning, jabbed it into his open chest. A scream erupted from every corner of the cave, the women's voices rising urgent. The figure froze, hovering in place, paralyzed. The song, it wasn't coming from the creature, it was sealed in the mirror. In a surge of desperate will, I smashed the mirror with the bone. The moment it shattered, a torrent of black smoke poured from the body, engulfing us. The chamber trembled, bone walls cracking, and the ground opened beneath me again. I fell. I don't know how long I was unconscious. When I awoke, I was in a circular underground structure. The walls were rough stone, covered with ancient, blood-drawn drawings. At the center sat a very old woman in a crude chair. She looked almost fossilized with paper-thin skin, but her eyes were wide, alive. "You freed the song," she said in a heavy accent. "Now you must bury it. For real." She explained, in broken phrases between coughing fits, that the mirror was a ritual seal. Over 200 years ago, a lineage of women discovered that the echoes of a spirit feeding on human form could manifest through deep emotions. Grief, guilt, longing. They called it Zanek, the chant of bones. It had no body. It took sentimental forms, becoming what you loved or feared most. And it made you sing. "If you hear the third song, it's too late," she said. That's when I realized I'd already heard two. The woman gave me a vial of thick, greenish liquid. "Drink it when it sings again. Only then will you see what's real." I hesitated, but distant footsteps pushed me. I took the bottle, nodded my thanks, and raced back through tunnels, now trembling as if the earth itself was alive. Emerging in the forest, it was a nightmare. The school was on fire, the road had vanished as if it never existed, and the sky had fissures, black lines tearing the blue, exposing a pulsing darkness. I ran aimlessly, feeling a constant pressure behind my eyes. Then the third song came. It was soft, delicate, almost motherly, not a folk tune but a melody creeping into the soul. I heard my grandmother singing, then a loved and lost woman's voice, then the cry of a child I never had. Then everything went white. When I regained consciousness, I was in a city, Moscow, in the subway, but everything seemed slightly off. People didn't look at me, they ignored me. The ads on the wall were in Russian, but the letters slowly melted. Every face looked too familiar. I wandered through the train cars looking for an exit, but couldn't find it. Then I saw Oleg. He was sitting on a bench, facing away. I touched his shoulder. He turned, but he had no eyes, only mouths where his eyes should be. Little mouths singing all at once. I screamed, backing away. The lights flickered, the scene shifted. I was no longer in Moscow, I was inside. The song. I remembered the vial and drank it. The pain was instant, like someone jamming hot iron into my temples. I collapsed, convulsing, feeling my brain warp. But it worked. When I came to, I was alone on a desolate plain, but with black handprints on my chest, as if something tried pulling me inside myself. The sky was still cracked. I walked for hours, maybe days. Shepherds from central Mongolia eventually found me. They fed and sheltered me. I tried explaining. One only said, "You saw the song. Now you must bury it or sing along." Returning to civilization seemed impossible. My face was no longer the same. One night the shepherds gave me a mirror and I almost smashed it. My eyes held a trace, a reflection lagging behind my true movements, as if something else mimicked me behind my skin. I stayed with them for weeks. They spoke little, just watched me intently. Sometimes they would whisper about my smell or the songs I hummed in my sleep. I didn't remember singing, but I heard things. Distant sounds, as if someone scratched a metal harp at the bottom of a damp cave. One silent dawn, I woke to the oldest shepherd next to my bed, weeping. He muttered an ancient prayer I'd never heard. As I sat up, he looked deep into my eyes and said, "The music sticks to you like worms to dead flesh. You need a second seal." I dared not ask about the first. Before I could, the yurt's roof trembled. A sudden pressure filled the air, and the ground groaned like bones scraping under earth. The old man knelt, vomited a thick black liquid and died, chest split open inside, as if something cut him without marking the skin. The others rushed in. Too late. Then I realized I hadn't brought the curse. It was already here, sleeping, and I had awakened it. That night, the shepherds expelled me, gave me a horse, a blanket, and a final word. The song never ends. It only changes tone. I made it to the nearest city, a decaying industrial town, factories seemingly suspended in time, eaten by rust and cobwebs. I stayed in a tiny room, paying with the little in my pocket. Days passed listening to the radio for any sign the world was still the same. But all I found were distortions, repeating religious programs, voices in dead tongues, static echoing my name. One night, wandering disused rail tracks, I met a man in rags with an oil lantern. He called me by name, said I was being followed by a fragment of Zanuck himself, a chosen in reverse. Someone who doesn't serve the creature but carries it unknowingly. "You cannot kill the song," he said, "but you can drown it inside yourself." I thought of suicide, but that wasn't it. The man led me to an abandoned Orthodox crypt, said I'd receive the second seal there for a price. He opened his own chest with a bone knife. No pain, no scream, just a mouth-shaped hole blossoming in his chest, beginning to sing. I wanted to run, but was hypnotized. The voice came from the hole, and my feet rooted to the floor. He handed me a stone inscribed with markings. With his last breath, he said, "If you forget who you are, the song fills you. Carry the stone. Remember." Ever since things got worse, I began losing memories. First, names, then faces, places. When I realized it, I didn't know if I was Brazilian, Russian, or something else. The song whispered in walls, train whistles, whined through the trees. I tried cutting my ears, tried pulling out my eyes, but the music was inside me. I made one last attempt, returned to the place of the mirror. The caves, the path was all different, the entrance gone. I found clues, dried blood, skulls buried up to the neck, claw marks on the stone. When I finally found the original hole, I descended to the tunnels. Down there, no more echoes, no bodies, just a stone table with a lit candle. On the table, a dark wooden box. Inside, a sheet of music, notes I'd never seen, written in a reddish, shiny substance. At the top, a name, Zanuck III, Final Act. What shocked me was the handwritten note at the bottom, only perform if ready to die. And I was almost ready. But before I continue this story, before revealing what lay on the last page of the score, listen to me for a moment. You've come this far with me. That means you feel something different. It's not just fear, it's recognition. Some part of you has also heard this kind of song somehow. So if this video stirs you, if anything resonates in your soul, let me know. Describe in the comments what you've heard that made you doubt reality. A sound, a voice, a recurring nightmare. Share, not just with me, but with everyone here, reading. This community is made of echoes, and maybe your echo will find another's. And if you want to help the channel keep bringing these stories, dark, real, heavy, subscribe, but only if you want to listen all the way. I gripped the box with trembling hands. The candle cast dancing shadows, twisting into faces of pain, and cruel laughter on the damp tunnel walls. The score, made of something like coagulated blood, glowed with a nearly living, pulsing light, as if it had a heart of its own. I knew reading those notes might mean my end, but it could be the key to ending this torment that clung to me like a formless shadow. I took a deep breath and began to hum the melody, even without understanding the words, as if they spoke to something within me that should never be named. Each note was a shard of pain, of trapped souls, of strangled screams, in eternal silence. My body trembled, vision blurred, and an icy chill spread through me, like a frozen sea enveloping my skin. The score was a sentence, a condemnation or a release, and I didn't know which. When I finished, a loud snap echoed, as if an invisible door had been kicked down inside the crypt. The air thickened, heavy, almost solid. The final melody echoed down the tunnel, and a shadow formed in the darkness. It wasn't human. It was nothing of this world. It was Zanuck, but not what I expected. A shadow splintering into 1,000 voices, a scream that became song, a presence passing through, flesh and soul. It looked at me with eyes made of nothing and everything, and its voice was the sound of 1,000 crows singing on a moonless night. You dared touch my essence. Now, you are part of the eternal choir. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. My body was overtaken by cold and black light. I felt my soul yanked up by the roots, ripped to pieces, scattered across time and space. When I woke, I was back in my room in the decaying town. Everything appeared normal except for one detail. Beside me, a black stone, just like the one the ragged man gave me, glowed with inscriptions I still could not read. And inside me, a persistent song, an endless call that would never let me rest. Today I write to warn you, some curses don't end. They only change shape and continue, growing in the dark. If you ever hear a strange song from the shadows, or sense a presence watching you, know it might be the beginning of something no one wants to face. This is the end of my story, or perhaps the start of a new song. If you enjoyed this descent into the shadows, if you felt the chill that cuts to the bone when the inexplicable knocks at your door, leave a like, share with someone who loves. Stories that challenge sanity. And of course, subscribe for more accounts that pierce the veil between the real and the supernatural. Here in our space, every story matters. If you've experienced something similar or felt something you can't explain, share it with us. Leave your experience in the comments. Let's build a network that listens and understands echoes from beyond, because here, no one is alone. Even when the song seems never-ending, thank you for staying until the end, for not looking away, and for facing the unknown with me. Until the next tale. May your night be filled with silence, or at least may the song be your friend, not your executioner.